What happens when Hollywood's most beloved rebel sits down with late-night television's most self-righteous host? The answer will shock you. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity interviews gone wrong. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert had been riding high in the ratings, but nothing could have prepared the audience for what was about to unfold on this particular evening. Johnny Depp, fresh off his legal victories and return to the spotlight, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his upcoming projects. What started as a standard promotional interview quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. The tension was palpable from the moment Depp walked onto the set. Colbert, known for his sharp wit and often condescending interview style, seemed to have an agenda from the very beginning. As the cameras rolled and the audience applauded, there was an unmistakable smugness in Colbert's demeanor that seasoned viewers of the show had come to recognize. "Johnny Depp, everybody," Colbert announced with his trademark grin, though those paying close attention could detect something almost predatory in his expression. "Thank you for being here, Johnny. I have to say, it's been quite a journey for you lately, hasn't it?" Depp, ever the professional, smiled graciously and settled into his chair. "It's good to be here, Stephen. Yes, it's been an interesting few years, that's for sure." "Interesting," Colbert repeated, his voice dripping with what seemed like barely contained disdain. "That's one way to put it. I mean, we're talking about a very public legal battle. Accusations flying left and right. Your career hanging in the balance. Some might say it was more than just interesting." The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the usual playful banter that characterized most late-night interviews. There was something darker at play here, something that made everyone in the studio feel like they were watching a predator circle its prey. Depp maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Well, Stephen, I think when you're in the public eye, people sometimes forget that you're a human being dealing with very real, very personal situations. The legal system worked, the truth came out, and I'm grateful for that." "The truth came out?" Colbert said with a laugh that sounded more like a sneer. "That's convenient, isn't it? The truth according to Johnny Depp. I'm sure our viewers are just dying to hear your version of the truth." The condescension in Colbert's voice was unmistakable now. Members of the audience began to murmur among themselves, sensing that something was very wrong with this interview. This wasn't the entertaining back and forth they had come to expect. This felt personal, vindictive even. Depp's eyes narrowed slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "Stephen, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at here, but I came on your show to talk about my work, about the projects I'm excited about. If you have specific questions about my films, I'm happy to answer them." "Oh, but Johnny," Colbert leaned forward with an almost theatrical malice, "your work is so intertwined with your personal life now, isn't it? I mean, how can we separate the art from the artist when the artist has been through what you've been through? When there are still people out there who question whether you're really the victim you claim to be?" The studio fell silent. Even the production crew seemed stunned by the host's aggressive approach. This wasn't journalism, this wasn't entertainment, this was something else entirely. Something that felt like a public execution disguised as an interview. Depp sat back in his chair, his famous smile fading. "Stephen, I have to ask, what exactly is your goal here? Because if you brought me on this show just to attack me, I think your audience deserves to know that up front." "Attack you?" Colbert's voice rose with mock surprise. "I'm just asking questions, Johnny. Isn't that what journalists do? Or are you only comfortable with softball questions now? Is that what celebrity has become? You only want to hear what makes you feel good about yourself?" The audience was now visibly uncomfortable. Some people were looking around nervously, others were checking their phones, and a few had actually gotten up to leave. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was becoming something ugly and unwatchable. Depp leaned forward, his voice taking on a harder edge. "You know what, Stephen? I've been doing interviews for over 30 years. I've sat across from some of the toughest journalists in the world, and I've never had a problem answering difficult questions. But what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's something else entirely." "What am I doing, Johnny?" Colbert's grin had become almost manic. "I'm giving you a platform to speak. Isn't that what you wanted? A chance to tell your story? Well, here's your chance. Tell us all about how you're the real victim here." The way Colbert said "real victim" made it clear he didn't believe it for a second. His tone was mocking, dismissive, and cruel in a way that seemed to shock even his own production team. Camera operators were glancing at each other nervously, and you could see the show's producers frantically whispering in the wing. Depp's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Stephen, I came here as a guest on your show. I expected to be treated with basic respect, the way you treat all your guests. But instead, you're sitting there with some kind of agenda, trying to relitigate issues that have already been resolved in a court of law." "Resolved?" Colbert laughed bitterly. "You think because you won a legal case, everything is resolved? You think the court of public opinion works the same way as a courtroom? Some of us aren't so easily convinced by expensive lawyers and carefully crafted narratives." The mask was completely off now. Colbert wasn't even pretending to be a neutral host anymore. He was revealing himself to be someone with a personal vendetta, someone who had clearly made up his mind about his guest long before the interview began. Depp stood up from his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled. "I think we're done here, Stephen. This isn't an interview, it's an ambush. And I'm not going to sit here and be insulted by someone who's supposed to be a professional." "Oh, you're leaving?" Colbert's voice was dripping with false concern. "Can't handle a little heat, Johnny? I thought you were tougher than that. I thought you were a rebel, a fighter. But apparently, you're just another fragile celebrity who can't handle real questions." The audience was now openly uncomfortable, with many people booing Colbert's behavior. This wasn't what they had come to see. They had expected entertainment, humor, and engaging conversation. Instead, they were witnessing what felt like a public humiliation attempt by a host who seemed to have lost all sense of professionalism and decency. Depp remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides, but his voice remained surprisingly calm. "You know what, Stephen? I've met bullies before. I've dealt with people who think they can use their platform to tear others down. But I never expected it from someone in your position." "Bully?" Colbert's laugh was harsh and grating. "That's rich coming from you. You want to talk about bullies? Let's talk about power dynamics. Let's talk about how Hollywood protects its own, no matter what they do. You think because you've got fans and money and influence, you can just waltz back into the spotlight like nothing happened?" The audience was becoming increasingly agitated. Several people had stood up and were shouting at Colbert to stop, but he seemed to be feeding off the chaos. His eyes had taken on an almost fevered gleam, as if he was enjoying the discomfort he was causing. "You're absolutely right about one thing, Stephen," Depp said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Power dynamics are important, and right now, you're using your power as a host to try to humiliate a guest. That says everything about who you really are." "Who I really am?" Colbert's voice rose to an almost shrill pitch. "I'm someone who asks the questions that need to be asked. I'm someone who doesn't just roll over and accept whatever narrative Hollywood wants to feed us. Unlike some people, I actually have integrity." The word integrity hung in the air like a challenge. Depp's eyes flashed with something dangerous, and for the first time since the interview began, he looked truly angry. "Integrity," Depp repeated slowly. "You want to talk about integrity? Let's talk about ambushing a guest on national television. Let's talk about using your platform to pursue what seems like a personal vendetta. Is that your definition of integrity, Stephen?" "Personal vendetta?" Colbert scoffed. "This isn't personal, Johnny. This is about accountability. This is about not letting celebrities think they can do whatever they want and then play the victim when there are consequences." "Consequences?" Depp's voice was getting louder now, matching Colbert's energy. "What consequences are you talking about? I went through a very public legal process. I had my reputation dragged through the mud. I lost work. I lost opportunities. I lost years of my life dealing with false accusations. What more consequences do you want?" The production crew was in full panic mode now. Producers were frantically gesturing from the wings, trying to get Colbert's attention, but he was completely focused on his target. It was as if he had tunnel vision, completely consumed by his need to tear down his guest. "False accusations?" Colbert's voice was dripping with skepticism. "According to who? According to you? According to your lawyers? Some of us aren't so easily convinced by legal maneuvering and public relations campaigns." "Legal maneuvering?" Depp was incredulous now. "Stephen, are you seriously suggesting that the entire legal system is corrupt? That judges and juries can be bought? Because that's what you're implying right now." "I'm implying that money talks," Colbert shot back. "I'm implying that when you have enough resources, you can make almost anything look like the truth. And I'm implying that some of us remember what we heard, what we read, what we saw before your very expensive legal team got involved." The audience was now openly hostile toward Colbert. People were shouting for him to stop, calling him names, and some were even throwing things. Security guards had moved closer to the stage, clearly preparing for the possibility that this situation could spiral completely out of control. Depp looked around at the chaos, then back at Colbert with something that might have been pity. You know what the really sad part is, Stephen? You had a chance to have a real conversation tonight. You could have asked me about my work, about my passion for storytelling, about the projects I'm excited about. Instead, you chose to turn this into whatever this is. This is honesty, Colbert declared, his voice now hoarse from shouting. This is what happens when someone finally refuses to play along with the celebrity protection racket. This is what accountability looks like, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Accountability? Depp's voice was filled with genuine confusion. Stephen, I don't understand what you think I need to be held accountable for. I went through a legal process. I was vindicated. What more do you want from me? I want you to admit that you're not the victim here, Colbert said, his voice taking on an almost pleading quality. I want you to stop pretending that you're some kind of martyr. I want you to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you're not the hero in this story. The desperation in Colbert's voice was palpable now. It was as if his entire worldview depended on Depp admitting guilt, on validating Colbert's preconceived notions about the situation. But Depp just shook his head sadly. Stephen, I don't know what happened to you, but this isn't who you used to be. The Stephen Colbert I knew was funny, insightful, and fair. This person sitting across from me right now, I don't know who this is. You don't know me, Colbert snapped. You don't know anything about me. You just know the character I play on television. But this is real, Johnny. This is me being real with you. If this is real, Depp said quietly, then I feel sorry for you, because the real you is cruel, vindictive, and completely lacking in basic human decency. The words hit Colbert like a physical blow. For a moment, his manic energy seemed to falter, replaced by something that looked almost like hurt. But then his anger returned, stronger than before. Human decency? He screamed. You want to talk about human decency? Where was your human decency when… Oh wait, I forgot. We're not supposed to talk about that, are we? We're supposed to pretend that the legal system is infallible and that rich people never get away with anything. Stephen, Depp said, his voice now filled with genuine concern. I think you need to take a step back. I think you need to look at what you're doing right now. This isn't journalism. This isn't entertainment. This isn't even good television. This is just sad. The concern in Depp's voice seemed to infuriate Colbert even more. Don't you dare patronize me, he snarled. Don't you dare stand there and act like you're the reasonable one here. You're the one with the history. You're the one with the baggage. You're the one who should be explaining yourself to the American people. I don't owe you an explanation, Depp said firmly. I don't owe you anything. I came here as a guest, and you've treated me like garbage. I'm done with this. Depp started to walk toward the edge of the stage, but Colbert wasn't finished. That's right, run away, he called after him. That's what you do, isn't it? When things get tough, when people start asking real questions, you just disappear. You hide behind your lawyers and your publicists and your carefully crafted image. Depp stopped and turned back, his face a mask of controlled fury. You know what, Stephen? You're right about one thing. I am going to disappear. I'm going to walk off this stage and never come back. And when people ask me about this interview, I'm going to tell them exactly what kind of person you really are. The threat in Depp's voice was unmistakable, and for the first time since the interview began, Colbert seemed to realize that he might have pushed too far, but instead of backing down, he doubled down on his aggression. Go ahead, Colbert said, his voice shaking with rage. Tell them whatever you want. Tell them how the mean host asked you tough questions. Tell them how you couldn't handle a little scrutiny. I'm sure your fans will eat it up. This isn't scrutiny, Stephen, Depp replied, his voice deadly calm. This is a hit job, and everyone in this room knows it. Everyone watching at home knows it. The only person who doesn't seem to know it is you. The audience erupted in applause at Depp's words, clearly showing where their sympathies lay. But Colbert seemed oblivious to the crowd's reaction, completely consumed by his need to continue the attack. Hit job? Colbert laughed bitterly. You think this is a hit job? You have no idea what a real hit job looks like. You've been protected your entire career by an industry that coddles its stars and covers up their mistakes. This is just someone finally refusing to play along with the game. What game? Depp demanded. What are you talking about? I came here to promote my work, to have a conversation with someone I thought was a professional. Instead, I find myself being interrogated by someone who seems to have made up his mind about me before I even walk through the door. Maybe I have made up my mind, Colbert admitted, his voice taking on a sinister quality. Maybe I've seen enough and heard enough to know exactly what kind of person you are. Maybe I'm tired of watching celebrities get away with everything and then playing the victim when someone finally calls them out. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Colbert had just admitted that this entire interview was a setup, that he had never intended to give Depp a fair hearing. The audience began to boo loudly, but Colbert seemed energized by their disapproval. "You want to know what I think?" Colbert continued, his voice rising above the crowd noise. "I think you're has been trying to make a comeback. I think you're hoping that people will forget what they heard about you if you just keep showing up and acting charming. But some of us have longer memories than that." "Has been?" Depp's voice was incredulous. "Stephen, I've been working in this industry for over 3 decades. I've created characters that people love. I've told stories that have touched millions of lives. What have you done besides sit behind a desk and tear down people who are actually creating things?" The insult hit its mark. Colbert's face flushed red with anger, and his carefully constructed television persona completely crumbled. "What have I done?" he screamed. "I've spent my career holding people accountable. I've used my platform to speak truth to power. I've never hidden behind lawyers and publicists when things got difficult. I've always stood up and faced the music." "Is that what you think you're doing right now?" Depp asked, his voice filled with genuine amazement. "You think you're speaking truth to power? Stephen, you are the power. You have a television show, you have a platform, you have influence, and you're using all of that to attack someone who came here as your guest." The role reversal was complete. Colbert, who had started the interview as the aggressor, now looked like the one who was out of control. His carefully cultivated image as a thoughtful, principled host was in ruins, replaced by someone who seemed petty, vindictive, and completely unprofessional. "I'm not attacking you," Colbert protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm asking you questions that need to be asked. I'm doing what journalists are supposed to do." "Journalists?" Depp laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Stephen, you're not a journalist. You're a talk show host, and not a very good one, based on what I've seen tonight." The production crew was now frantically trying to get Colbert's attention, making cutting motions across their throats, clearly wanting to end this disaster before it got any worse. But Colbert was completely focused on his target, seemingly oblivious to everything else happening around him. "You know what your problem is, Johnny?" Colbert said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "You think you're untouchable. You think that because you've got money and fame and lawyers, you can just waltz back into the spotlight like nothing happened. But some of us haven't forgotten. Some of us remember what we heard." "What you heard," Depp repeated slowly. "Not what you know, not what you've investigated, not what you've verified. What you heard. And based on what you heard, you decided to ambush me on national television." "I'm not ambushing you," Colbert insisted, though his voice was beginning to crack. "I'm giving you a chance to explain yourself. I'm giving you a platform to set the record straight. By attacking me from the moment I sat down," Depp's voice was filled with disbelief. "By treating me like I'm guilty of something? By making it clear that you've already made up your mind about me? That's your idea of giving me a chance?" The audience was now chanting for Colbert to apologize, but he seemed incapable of backing down. His pride, his ego, his entire sense of self seemed to be wrapped up in this confrontation. "I don't need to apologize for asking tough questions," Colbert declared, though his voice was shaking. "I don't need to apologize for holding celebrities accountable. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye." "You're absolutely right," Depp said, his voice suddenly calm again. "I shouldn't be in the public eye, at least not on your show. I shouldn't subject myself to this kind of treatment from someone who clearly has no respect for his guests or his profession." Depp began walking toward the exit again, but this time, Colbert's voice took on a desperate quality. "Where are you going?" he called out. "We're not finished here. You can't just walk away from this conversation." "Watch me," Depp said without turning around. "This conversation was over the moment you decided to ambush me instead of interviewing me." "Security!" Colbert suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Security, don't let him leave. This interview isn't over." The security guards looked confused, glancing between Colbert and Depp uncertainly. They clearly didn't know what to do in this unprecedented situation. "Stephen," Depp said, turning back one final time, You've just shown your true colors to everyone watching. You've revealed yourself to be someone who uses his power to bully guests, someone who has no respect for basic decency or professionalism. And now you're trying to have me physically restrained, because I won't sit here and take your abuse." The words hit Colbert like a slap in the face. For a moment, he seemed to realize what he had become, what he had done. But instead of backing down, he made one final, desperate attempt to regain control. "Get him out of here," he screamed at the security guards. "Get him off my stage. This is my show, and I want him gone." The security guards reluctantly moved toward Depp, who raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Don't worry," Depp said, his voice carrying clearly through the studio. "I'm leaving. I wouldn't want to spend another second on this stage with someone who has so little respect for basic human dignity." As Depp walked off the stage, the audience erupted in applause, giving him a standing ovation. Meanwhile, Colbert sat at his desk, his face flushed and his hands shaking, looking like a man who had just destroyed his own career on national television. The cameras kept rolling as Depp disappeared into the wings, capturing every moment of Colbert's complete meltdown. It was a moment that would live in television history, not as entertainment, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when power goes unchecked and professionalism gives way to personal vendetta. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Could Colbert have handled this differently, or was this always going to end in disaster? Make sure to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories, and let me know in the comments what you think really motivated Colbert's bizarre behavior that night.